In the heart of Bavaria, about an hour's drive from Munich, a lone white pillar stands in a field, a stark reminder of one of Germany's most chilling and unsolved mysteries, the Hinterkaifeck murders. This dark event, which gained worldwide infamy, remains unsolved even a century later. Tonight we'll explore this unsettling story, one that could make you feel a little less safe in your own home. To understand the horror that occurred here, we need to go back in time to the origins of Hinterkaifeck itself. Built around 1863, Hinterkaifeck was a secluded farmhouse complex, consisting of a single-story elongated building with living quarters and a barn, which joined perpendicularly with a larger barn structure, forming an L shape. Above this layout was a long attic that stretched continuously over the living and barn areas. Despite its name, Hinterkaifeck was never officially a village or neighborhood. It was simply an informal name. The property, known as house number 27½, was part of the small village of Gröbern in the then municipality of Wangen, located about a kilometer from Kaifeck. The farm was isolated, with the nearest inhabited property hundreds of meters away, making it a true Einödhof, or isolated farmstead. On this remote plot lived Andreas Gruber, age 64, and his wife, Cecilia, 72, along with their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, and her 2 children, Cecilia and Joseph. They were joined by Maria Baumgartner, a maid who had just arrived on the farm to replace a previous maid who'd quit, claiming the place was cursed. By early April 1922, residents of the nearby village began noticing odd and troubling occurrences. The Grubers, known to be consistent churchgoers, were suddenly absent from services. Mail piled up at the farm, and young Cecilia hadn't attended school for days. Concerned, 3 men, Schlittenbauer, Pöll, and Ziegel, went to check on the family on April 4th. What they found would haunt them forever. Inside the barn and living quarters, they discovered the bodies of Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, young Cecilia, Joseph, and Maria, all savagely murdered. What made this crime particularly chilling were the events surrounding it. The police later found no valuables had been stolen, even though the family was known to have considerable wealth stored on the property. It seemed the killer, or killers, didn't flee after the murders. Neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the farmhouse chimney in the days following the murders, suggesting someone was still inside lighting fires. The animals had been fed, meals prepared, and the family dog was tied up outside as if someone was still living there. But these strange happenings began long before the fateful night of March 31st. Weeks earlier, Andreas Gruber found a Munich newspaper on the property. Unusual, as no one in the area subscribed to that publication. He also found footprints in the snow leading toward the house, but none leading away. Soon after, the family noticed one of their house keys was missing, and a lock on their tool shed had been broken, with a cow inexplicably set loose. At night, they heard footsteps from the attic. Andreas searched the upper floor but found nothing. Despite sharing these unsettling events with neighbors, Andreas refused to involve the police. In the days before the murders, an argument erupted between Victoria and her father, reportedly so intense that Victoria fled the farm. Her daughter later recounted this to a school friend, saying her mother had returned hours later, found hiding in the woods. The day of the murders, Maria Baumgartner's sister, who had accompanied her to the farm, was likely the last person to see the family alive. On the night of March 31st, someone lured each family member into the barn one by one and killed them with a pickaxe found on the property. Victoria, Andreas, and Cecilia were murdered in a room adjoining the barn. Gruesomely, young Cecilia survived the initial blow and lingered for hours, pulling out clumps of her own hair in agony. After these murders, the killer moved into the house, where they killed Maria in her chamber, and finally, young Joseph, asleep in his crib. In the days following the murders, the killer or killers continued to live on the farm. Neighbors noticed the family's absence from church, and the mail continued to pile up. On April 4th, mechanic Albert Hoffner arrived to fix a motor at the property. Hearing nothing but the lowing of cows and barking of the dog, he assumed no one was home and began his repairs. When he left, he reported the eeriness of the empty farm to neighbors. Later that day, Schlittenbauer and his companions found the bodies, hidden and partially covered. The investigation was a mess from the start. Initial officers arrived at night, and by morning, curious onlookers had contaminated the crime scene. Though police found 2 indentations in the attic hay, suggesting someone had been hiding there, they gathered few usable clues. The murder weapon, a pickaxe with human hairs still attached, was later discovered hidden in the attic, but it led to no answers. Desperate authorities even attempted seances with spiritualists in hopes of identifying the killer. Suspects were plentiful, though none were ever conclusively tied to the crime. Among the theories, some pointed to Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband, presumed dead in the war. But rumors circulated that he'd faked his death and returned, furious to discover the incestuous relationship between Victoria and her father, which had produced young Joseph. Others suspected Lorenz Schlittenbauer, Victoria's former lover, and the one who found the bodies, as he seemed unnervingly familiar with the layout of the home. When they found the bodies, he opened the farmhouse's locked door with the missing key, which he claimed had been in the door. His strange demeanor and inconsistent comments kept him under suspicion for years. Then there was Joseph Bertel, a mentally ill baker who'd escaped from a nearby asylum the year before. Locals believed he was capable of such a heinous act, though he was never found. Other suspects included Peter Weber, who reportedly spoke to a friend about robbing the Grubers, and the Gump brothers, whose sister later accused them of committing the murders. The family's gruesome death sent waves of shock through the village and beyond. No new house was ever built on the land, and within a year the Hinterkaifeck farmhouse was demolished, leaving behind only stories and suspicions. The property is now farmland, with no trace of the tragic events that occurred there, except for a single memorial stone in the Weidhofen cemetery. Today, 100 years later, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain Germany's most haunting unsolved case. For as long as the truth stays hidden, Hinterkaifeck will remain a ghostly presence, casting long shadows over Germany's dark history. If you know more about this story, share it in the comments. Until next time.